Why does it tell me chat is now open to everyone? Alright, that's an interesting message to start the stream. Oh, I suppose Prism changes the settings. Anyway, my usual disclaimer, I'm multi-streaming, so I'm not really seeing any of the chats except for the YouTube one. But in the settings, I tried to set the YouTube chat to subscribers only, because why the hell not, since that's the only one I'm seeing anyway. And there's only bots on YouTube anyway, so if anyone asks like an actual genuine question, I'd like to see it, you know, rather than just ignore it with the torrent of random bot messages. But I suppose that the setting changes automatically when you do it from... Can I actually... No? Oh. Yeah, I can do a wider. Okay, cool. Maybe the setting changes when you stream from mobile. Well, anyway. So, yeah, if anyone wants to contact me for whatever reason, again, this is not one of those streams. There's a million different ways to contact me. There's a form on my website. My Twitter DMs are still open. Although, I don't know, Twitter is probably a horrible place now to contact anyone because of just how depraved the situation with bots is on Twitter. I for the longest time I did remember to check my like secondary inbox with unconfirmed direct messages, because all the direct messages now go into your like hidden direct, like hidden inbox first now, because of the bots. Back in the day, only like egregiously bot messages went there. Now everything goes there because like system, well, can no longer differentiate because of how many bots are out there. And for some time I was remembering to check it periodically. Now I don't remember to check it. Well, anyway, Twitter, yeah. The form on my website, there's Patreon, and that's probably about it. You know, at least one of those is free, and Patreon is also free. You can now join Patreons like without subscribing, and not so you can now join a Patreon or follow somebody on Patreon without necessarily subscribing to them, and you should be able to DM creators there. But if not, there's a form on the website, which is essentially like an email. You just send an email without using your email. You're using the form to send an email. So that is 100% free, available to everyone. So yeah, Evil Within 2. I've been somewhat fascinated that game for quite a long time. My original run, I just absolutely was not in the mood for what that game was at the start, at least. Now I've learned that that's actually pretty much the entire game. I was completely right about 10 years ago when I tried that game for the first time. But for the first time when I tried that game 10 years ago, I had so little patience for its bullshit. I don't think I even got out of the tutorial, essentially. So the first two chapters of the game aren't actually a chapter. The first two chapters of the game should have basically just been called prologue. It's essentially just one big unskippable cutscene. If you legitimately don't skip all the like actual cutscenes in it that you otherwise can skip, the game basically doesn't start for approximately 1 hour and a half. Yes, there's a little bit of gameplay with the combat tutorial. You get to kill one zombie, and there's a bit of a stealth tutorial. You get to stealth kill 2 zombies, but both of those sequences are so scripted, so hand-holdy, that like I basically don't really count that as gameplay. Chapter 3 starts with actual kind of like, gameplay starting, and it starts with the thing that is one of the claims to fame of psychobreak 2, which is its open world elements. Momo, come on. When that was a frozen pile of stuff, it was one thing. Now there's probably so many stuff living in it, in that pile of hay. I don't want you to be stepping all over it. And that is probably what most reviewers, either professional or amateur on YouTube, like played. So chapter 3 and 4 take place in the main kind of like segment of the game, that the map that we should probably just call Union. And that is like the biggest open world segment of the game. There's another hub-ish like open world area, actually, after that one. Well, after about 2 hours of unskippable cutscenes. But from there, the game is almost entirely linear. There's one small return to the second hub world later, but it is significantly different, and it is still kind of like semi-open, but it is also streamlined because, like, shit's being intensified, so it's not really time for exploration anymore at that point, And yeah, so like on my first attempt, I don't think I even got to the point where you can like actually start playing. I was just like super annoyed with the fact that for over an hour, it's just either cutscenes or unskippable cutscenes. Unfortunately, the year was 2017, and that was towards the tail end of the AAA industry and the shill market of consumers and like amateur reviewers being absolutely obsessed with heavily scripted story kind of like based experiences rather than video games. The biggest one, of course, we all know would be The Last of Us, but then God of War was also big around that time. Uncharted 4 obviously is like the most successful, most popular Uncharted of all time, which is super sad to me because Uncharted 4 is also like the weakest really Uncharted as far as like characters and the story go. And the fact that The Evil Within 2 or Psychobreak 2 was basically playing into all of that, was playing into the fad of hey, we are going to make this highly cinematic experience that is in the third person for no effing good reason at all. Everyone was just like eating it up and being like, oh, so cinematic, oh, so elevated, oh, elevated cinematic storytelling, yes baby, give me more. In fact, like Psychobreak 2 went absolutely overboard with how much of a linear, scripted, borderline walking simulator, haunted house ride, like, movie game it is. So I kind of want to address right away that a lot of people compare that game to The Last of Us because of how story-driven it is, how many like scripted linear set pieces there are in the game, and also kind of how like resource management, and crafting in that game works. Yeah, there are definitely similarities, with The Last of Us, especially also if you consider the fact that the game kind of leans into stealth quite a bit more than the first one. But I think comparing it to The Last of Us, as in, The Last of Us has this, I'm talking about the first game, of course, has this bad rap for being like one of the biggest, one of the most like prototypical movie games. Well, like, we're not talking about games by like Quantic Dream, right? That are just like adventure games, like interactive movie adventure games. No, like The Last of Us is still a game, but a lot of people give it very bad rap for kind of like being this game that's like, it's like everything is super scripted, everything is super linear. The game has the illusion of player agency and player choice, but in fact, it's essentially just a masked one big cutscene. It's just like that not a lot of people actually realize it. I do not agree with that, actually. I think The Last of Us offered a very healthy balance between a lot of storytelling, but also pretty bitching gameplay. And comparing something like The Last of Us to psychobreak 2 and be like, look, psychobreak 2 is linear, of course, and it's haunted house, right? But it's essentially just... Oh, mosquito. Nice. It's essentially just like... Aini, come back. I cannot follow you there. It's essentially just like The Last of Us, so what's your problem, dude? No. There's like a giant problem I have with that game. Even in the arguably most scripted part of The Last of Us, which was the final segment, right, where like Joel goes Rambo in the hospital, even that is not compatible with pretty much anything that Psychobreak 2 has to offer outside of like chapters 3 and 4. Even that segment has much more player agency. The Last of Us in general, yes, there's a lot of cutscenes, but the gameplay part of The Last of Us feels like a video game. I'm sorry, it just does. Psychobreak 2, at pretty much no point other than chapter 3 and 4 and whatever, chapter 6 maybe, that takes place in the second mini hub world, ever basically feels like a video game. It just doesn't. So the first claim to fame, of the game, that the game is, this like super cool video game, and the fact that it's a walking simulator is not a problem at all. No, it's it's a giant problem. It is a giant problem. Over 50% of the game, easily over 50% of the game are basically just haunted house rides. And I do not understand how more people, even in 2017, when it was kind of like towards the tail end of that like obsession with cinematic experiences, masked as video games, still, it was already kind of like late enough. Even by the standards of that time, even by the standards of God of War reboot, right? God of War 4 or soft reboot, and like Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us. Even by the standard of those like Sony games, the degree of linearity and hand-holdy and just scriptedness of Psychobreak 2 was absolutely off the charts. Most of the time, when you are not in the first mini hub world or the second hub world, in fact, by most, I mean something like 90% of the time, when you're not in those two hub worlds, you are basically just on the rails. You're basically just going down the hallway with spooky stuff happening and random stuff happening around you. You're being teleported around, you're being launched into, I don't know, other dimensions and stuff like that. Ooh, spooky, Well, it would have been spookier if, one, there was at least some level of player agency, and second, it would have been spookier if this is my biggest problem with Psychobreak 2. We have something like Alone in the Dark 2008 or Alan Wake. Why those two games? Well, because Alone in the Dark is an actual open world game, and Alan Wake was originally meant to be an open world game. So those two games, I think, pose pretty interesting comparison to Psychobreak 2. Horror, or rather paranormal. Paranormal is spooky when it intrudes on reality. When you fling your character into a reality that it is already established from the beginning that it is fake, first of all, but second, that reality is absolutely out of whack. Anything can happen at any time. A character can be, thrown into different dimensions, can be teleported anywhere, survive craziest set pieces, and then just be teleported into another one. And it's kind of like, oh, now we're doing this thing. Oh, now we're doing that thing. None of that has any weight to it. It's like basically just a lot of pretty impressive visuals, but with no substance at all, and pretty much no tension at all. And I do not understand how so many people were impressed with both the first game and the second game, and rarely anyone brings up the fact that because of how random those games are, because how there are no rules to that universe, if anything can happen at any moment, well, that means your universe has no rules. Like literally, again, anything could happen at any moment. When there are no rules, people just don't care because it's not believable. Like I said, paranormal is spooky when it intrudes on established, solid reality. When the reality itself is just a bunch of random flashing images, like I just cannot get immersed in that at all. I understand why a lot of people were very impressed by the visuals, but I do not understand how, since both games are relatively niche, they didn't really find like mainstream success. Presumably, the only fans of both of the games are relatively hardcore survival horror fans, and barely anyone calls either of the games out for actually like their horror having almost no impact at all due to the nature of that horror. So yeah, and the fact that most of the time you are so obviously completely out of agency and you are just walking down a corridor. And when you get to the end of the corridor, there's going to be a spoop and you'll get teleported into another hallway. Ooh, so spoopy. First of all, it's boring. It's boring to play through. Second of all, I'm not super impressed because it's just random stuff happening. If there was at least some system to it all, or if there was some sort of some level of player agency, it might have been, but I am sorry guys, but the game is both boring, super unimmersive, and basically completely zero engagement. Because it takes control away from you all the time. And when you take control away from me, I cannot be engaged. It might as well just watch a Let's Play. Or a compilation of all the cutscenes, which would pretty much be the entire Let's Play, because, realistically, almost every other action, at the end of every other hallway, there's some kind of cutscene. Even if it's not like an outright movie, it's some form of superscripted animation, superscripted, directed action, which just doesn't particularly if you just cut between the cutscenes, you probably wouldn't really enjoy all those crazy visuals as much. Like really the meat of the game is basically just crazy visuals, flashing images, you know, your character being teleported around. Oh, I'm in one room, and then a bright flash, you know, appears on the screen, and now I'm in the other room. That's not technically a cutscene, right? But those types of shit is basically most of the game. So yeah, more or less the entire game is just one big cutscene. Now, I kind of want to mention on the gameplay side of things in general. I was kind of okay with the open world, with the idea of kind of like an open world type of thing, and I did have fun for about an hour, maybe running around. Although I got pretty screwed by RNG. And I was playing on survival actually, so that's like normal difficulty. And I even looked up a let's play of Super Best Friends, and they didn't have that problem. They had that problem for like 1 second. No, they really didn't have that problem at all. Pat was playing, and I had a really big problem with resources all the way almost to level 4. I just couldn't explore at all, because anywhere I would go, I just didn't have any resources to take care of enemies at all. And I was playing super stealthily, and arguably even more stealthily than Pat. Pat was like shooting things left and right. He was playing stealthy also, but he would often, like, you know, shoot things. I rarely had anything to shoot anything with. Like Pat, for example, went into church in chapter 3 right away and killed those 3 guys. Guys, at that point, I had like 6 bullets in my handgun. I couldn't kill those 3 guys. Like, I had to run away. So I got very weirdly screwed. I barely had any ammo for anything until basically it was time to go into the marrow to progress into chapter 5. Or maybe it was already chapter 5, but you get what I'm saying, like to out of the Union into the marrow, you know, on the way to the second hub world with the city hall. So exploration for me was kind of botched. I don't know, I think I got screwed with RNG. But also, once you do explore Union, you realize how small it is, first of all. But second, there's essentially only one real side quest. It's the 2 guards that I don't remember what they were doing. Like rounding up citizens of Union and killing them before they turn, and allegedly hogging some resources. Alright, that's pretty much the only real side quest in that entire area. So you go into the auto parts shop, and then the other point of interest points you to the Marrow Armory, which is a pretty interesting optional zone. But if you go there early in the game, there's almost no point going there, honestly, because you will lose more resources than you will get out of there, or at the very best you will break even. Another kind of like strange place to explore early in the game. And that's pretty much it, like those 2 points. And then you go to the whatever, like visitor center, I think, or something like that, and you get a linear scripted scene there, another one, the 3rd one. And both places where you go to the auto shop, and I think to the Marrow when you go as well, I think when you go meet them at the house that leads to the Marrow Armory, you don't get it. What I'm trying to say is that quest, essentially, yeah, it does lead you to specific places in Union to explore. Ooh, very interesting, right? Yeah, but unfortunately, like those places, they just end up in scripted, linear, spooky house rides sequences. spooky haunted house ride sequences, and it's just not particularly engaging, and it was very annoying and disappointing. You can find the bitch from the first game that doesn't actually quite look like the bitch from the first game, because like that spider lady, well, she's no longer a spider. She's basically now just like a tall lady, you know. You can find that lady, and she will be pursuing you throughout basically like most of the game, well, like half of the game, just for you in the end to get a revolver out of it. And that system in and of itself is completely bugged, because that bitch will randomly spawn, right, when you explore. But the problem is that every time she spawns, all the doors lock. Sometimes she spawns somewhere outside, and you are in like a small shed somewhere with just like a few items to pick up, or maybe there's a shed like across the road from the warehouse where you go to find Lily at the end of chapter 3. And like in that shed, there is nothing in that shed. There's just a workbench there, and that's it. There is nothing else in that shed. So if the bitch spawns when you're in that shed, you're just locked in that shed for like a minute until she goes away. And that happened multiple times to me. Yes, sometimes she spawns, like in the diner she spawned, for example, and there's like a set piece for her. Ooh, spooky linear, totally not hand-holding stealth set piece. And there are quite a few more like that. But those are at least set pieces, so that's okay. That's interesting, I suppose. Although I couldn't give less of a fuck about those. But when it happens at random, and you're just in some random house she would never go into because she probably doesn't have pathing for that area, and you just stand in that house like an idiot waiting for the door to open. Like, what the hell kind of system is that? Jesus Christ, guys. Yeah. And yeah, the open world by itself is actually like really short, really small. And then the second one is even smaller, and also has the problem of the nemesis, you know, walking around. Plus the ghost bitch is walking around. So it's like, yeah, oof. So much fun exploring those areas. Momo, come here. So yeah, I honestly, the whole thing of like open world being so innovative. No, open world was innovative in Alone in the Dark 2008, and none of you fuckers played that game because it was like too old, I suppose, for you. You know. I don't know, maybe it's janky as fuck on the PC. I played the PS3 version that was supposed to be unjanked somehow, and yeah, I played the Inferno version, and it was pretty splendid. I had absolutely nothing against that game other than it didn't have an ending, but other than that, it was pretty interesting. It was pretty damn fine, I'll tell you. This one though, yeah, unfortunately it's not a real open world game. It just has 1-2 small hubs for you to explore, and it's kind of like, it's just a mini gimmick, you know. Those are very standalone, very like isolated parts of the game, while the rest of the game, I would say at least 60 to 70% of it is just entirely linear cutscene, really. And I also just explained to you why that cutscene doesn't really do anything for me, because, to kind of like summarize it in short once more, horror is horror, okay? Supernatural horror is spooky when it intrudes on reality, not when reality is just the crazy space where everything is possible. That's not scary. That's just a haunted house ride. Come on, move. Aini probably had enough, so we're gonna head back. One last thing to note, real quick, is that I honestly, just for good measure, I kind of looked up the Let's Play of Evil Within 1. And, as disjointed and kind of poorly paced as that game was, and in the opening also, there's so much just absolutely insanely idiotic random imagery that is absolutely over the top, and you can immediately tell that none of this is real. And even before the big twist that you are all in the STEM system, right? You can immediately tell that none of this is real. This is just you are in other people's heads, or in someone head, or just in some kind of simulation, and all of those theories are correct, essentially. None of it is scary. It's basically done in a similar fashion to something like Psychobreak 2. It's like Psychobreak 2 just completely inherited that element of direction from the first game. And but while the game is teleporting you around this insane, spooky, look how spooky this is scenery, tries to spook you with jump scares and yada 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 yada. There's a lot of stuff like that. True. But in between those teleports, honestly, there's a pretty steady, pretty basic kind of not necessarily run and gun, but walk and gun gameplay that pretty much feels almost exactly like RE4, but not as good, which is actually one of my problems with Psychobreak 2 as well. But Psychobreak 2 is actually worse. I didn't remember that about Psychobreak 1, but Psychobreak 1 was actually much better about this particular thing. The gameplay was just better in Psychobreak 1. In Psychobreak 2, you basically cannot fucking hit anything because of how terribly everything is animated. And you might say, no, everything is animated this way so that the game is more challenging, It's more realistic this way, and it's spookier and creepier. No. The way enemies are animated in Psychobreak 2, it's the equivalent of if you take an image, a JPEG, and drag it sporadically around the screen with the mouse. You just jerk the mouse around. That's how they animate it. It's not spoopy. It is completely unrealistic. It is just cartoonishly over-exaggerated and unpredictable. And it's very difficult to hit anything in Psychobreak 2 because of that. And I remember Psychobreak 1 kind of being that way also. Actually, no, Psychobreak 1 was much better in that way. They both share the problem of enemies are very unreliable to stagger. Again, unlike RE4. Not even talking about the fact that you can sometimes headshot them, but the headshot doesn't kill them. Headshot sometimes doesn't even stagger them, which makes absolutely no sense to me. It made no sense to me in Psychobreak 1. I have no idea why Shinji Mikami would make a combat system like that. But paired with the fact that in Psychobreak 2, good luck even hitting anything in the first place, the gameplay of 1, I actually enjoyed quite more, I suppose, now that I remember it. And also, like I said, yes, quite a bit of scripted haunted house rides, ridiculous, unimmersive, spoopy stuff does happen in Psychobreak 1, but at least once you are teleported into the new setting, you usually do have quite a bit of agency. you usually start playing a video game from that point on. In Psychobreak 2, you pretty much only play the video game in the opening, in the 2 opening hub worlds, which isn't even 50% of the game. The rest is not even like a linear horror shooter, which was Psychobreak 1. It's basically just one giant cutscene. And yeah, the first game wasn't like that. No, the first game was much more of just kind of like a linear horror shooter. It was much better at being that than the second game. It legitimately was much better. And I was not remembering it, actually, funny enough. All my brain was remembering about Psychobreak 1 that it was, just like the super disjointed, very poorly paced, completely random, crazy adventure. But no, the Psychobreak 1 was actually a horror shooter. Second game, nah, it's just a walking simulator. So yeah, those were my thoughts on Psychobreak 2. I have no idea what Shinji Mikami was thinking. And if he was thinking of doing like, Uncharted / well, it's very obvious that he was thinking of doing an Uncharted / The Last of Us type of take on the loosely speaking Biohazard 4 formula. As a producer, he was thinking it with the second game. He was not directing it, actually, which honestly, if you're a producer, if you're a director, it's all fucking tomato. Like it's very obvious that some people have a say, regardless of whether they're the owner of the company or whether they are the CEO of the company. But nonetheless, if he was thinking of making something like The Last of Us, he took it completely over the top, which is something that Japanese developers do sometimes. It's very obvious that Psychobreak 2 was very heavily inspired by games like The Last of Us, and they completely misunderstood. They completely misread where the line, where the Last of Us line was between cinematic experience and an actual video game. He completely misread where that line was placed, and just went way overboard, and I have no idea why nobody stopped him. With the first game, he already went completely overboard with completely losing understanding of how paranormal stuff's supposed to be spooky. Like I explained, it is spooky when it intrudes on reality. And not when reality itself makes no sense. When reality itself makes no sense, you just stop giving a fuck, because there are no rules. When no rules, then nothing you see is spooky. It's just random and potentially impressive visuals. But that's it. So he already did it with the first game, but the first game was at least legitimately kind of like a shitty Biohazard 4. Again, I have no idea why he completely lost touch with what actually made the Biohazard 4 combat system work. But it was a shitty one, but at least it kind of was a Bio 4, The second game is just... I don't even know what. I honestly don't even know what to compare it to, because neither the God of War reboot, God of War 4, nor Bioshock, sorry, not Bioshock, nor The Last of Us, I was thinking Biohazard, like Resident Evil. The closest game to compare it to would probably be something like Biohazard Village, Biohazard 8 Village. That game also starts as kind of like this is like a Metroidvania-y, it's return to formula of RE4, or even maybe something like RE2 or 3, where you kind of have like a Metroidvania-ish open world. And the game is that for exactly 1 hour. Oh, actually, no, sorry, hour and a half. And from there, it's just a haunted house ride the entire, for 5 hours, and then the game just ends. That would be the closest comparison, but of course, that game was pretty far away. That game came out way later. But at the time when Psychobreak 2 came out, I cannot even compare it to anything else. The close comparison, again, would be something like God of War or The Last of Us, or maybe something I just completely not even thinking about. Maybe Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 was pretty scripted, but I don't think it was that much more scripted than like the previous 3 games. And the previous 3 games, yeah, they had a lot of cutscenes, but they were also video games primarily. So, yeah, dude, I don't know what Tango were thinking with the second game. First game failed because it kind of sucked. Second game, but retroactively, actually, I think it earned a lot of fans, and I myself am actually now considering potentially even replaying it, although I don't want to play the PC version, because PC version back in the day it wasn't running at all. It was crashing every 10 minutes. I don't know if it's playable now. But yeah, I originally kind of hated it, but what I wasn't realizing was that I actually hated the second one much more, for all the reasons that the first game actually did pretty well. So I'm kind of now considering myself as a semi-fan of the first game after all, probably. But no, arguably the Psychobreak 1 was not a very good game. Like I said, it was basically a shitty Biohazard 4, and that doesn't make it particularly fantastic in my mind. But yeah, the second game is barely even a video game at all, and I completely ignored it when it came out because I just couldn't force myself through all these opening cutscenes, and I thought, well, maybe I'm being an ass for no reason, because maybe the game actually gets like really good and open once you get into the open world and the game starts proper. Sure, there will be some linear segments, but like whatever, I don't mind linear segments. Little did I know that the open world starts and pretty much ends immediately, and all that you're left aren't even linear segments as much as just walking segments, with flashing images. And that's the game. So yeah, what you see with Psychobreak 2 in the opening is basically what you get. It's just that after approximately an hour and a half of that, and the rest of the game that's just like that, you get about 2.5, maybe 3 hours of exploring like a small open world, which is pretty fun for about an hour, maybe even 2 hours. But honestly, the other hour, maybe 2 hours of that open world exploration isn't even all that fun, because like it gets old and there's barely anything to find in it except for a few additional haunted house rides. So yeah, interesting experience, returning to that game. The reason why I returned to it, I'm not going to go into detail, but basically I got it a few months ago for free on Epic. And yeah, I just was kind of like, okay, whatever. What can I kind of play for 30 minutes while waiting for something to render? And yeah, that was it. Okay, now it's proper time to end. It's darkish and everything, and getting coldish. Not sure if I will be on tomorrow, but I may or may not. Bye-bye.